This is the Citizen Annan Show. A very happy new year and a very prosperous and safe new year. First of all, let me thank you for liking my page and going on YouTube. I would like to call this fourth episode The Elephant in the Room. That means that there's something going on and we are not talking about it. And it's about peace versus justice in Ghana. So you're watching the Citizen Annan Show, and this is the Citizen Annan asking you to keep watching, keep liking, and don't forget to share. The last show, we looked at the values and norms and the changing systems and the structures. We went through a lot of things that ended up with us looking at institutions and systems. Now this segues very nicely into the current situation we find ourselves. In this fraught post-election period, whilst this show, Citizen Annan, is about Ghanaians and chooses very carefully not to get embroiled into various partisan issues, I think it's important that in the examination of justice, we talk about what has happened in the recent elections. Time to juxtapose justice with the truth and ask whether the truth can also be sacrificed at the altar of freedom. Now, I would like us to say that in this exercise of looking at values and norms in our institutions, we are faced with the political setup in the Constitution that allows us to enjoy multi-party democracy in a form or the other. And according to the 1992 Constitution, that I think it was Act 43, that set up an institution called the Electoral Commission. Now, as all institutions, these are put in place to serve, let me say again, to serve us, to make sure that the endeavors of Ghanaians, the endeavors of government, the endeavors and aspirations of the people are achieved. Now, what are the values? What should be the values of an institution like the Electoral Commission? What we saw on the 9th of December was that an institution that has a lot of resources put at its disposition, an institution whose leader has the same status as an appeal court judge, an institution where the deputies have the same status as high court judge, produced a result with a monumental arithmetical mistake. Now, we all know that in every institution, in every line of work, mistakes can happen. Even in surgery, I used to work in surgery many years ago, and you might find that a monumental mistake, like the right leg has to be amputated, and eventually you see that the mistake is made and the left leg is amputated. It has consequences, very severe consequences, serious consequences, where people who are charged and given the responsibility of making sure that such mistakes don't happen are held to account. Now, without going into the details, one of the things that struck me, I don't watch much television, but for the elections I did, and I was amazed at how since when the results started coming in, there was a constant, for one, the incumbent party 51%, and for the opposition 47%, I examined 7 TV stations, and out of the 7, 6, right from the start until the announcement was made, it was 51-47, 51-47, 51-47, until finally the Electoral Commission also came out with approximately 51% for the incumbent and 47% for the opposition. Now that in many circles would raise eyebrows, but be that as it may, a mistake was made because I, as a person who was never very good at maths, I did take out my calculator when the announcement was made and did the arithmetic, and it wasn't 51% thereabouts, it was closer to 50%. So once a mistake like this has made, I think it's incumbent on the institution to, first of all, abjectly apologize to the people of Ghana and then to correct it. But instead what we see is that the correction was made, or an attempt was made at the correction, with an additional 330,000 votes, and we ended up with more than 100% and so on and so forth. So clearly, if we are talking about the truth and justice and something that serves us, we should not allow such errors to persist and for it to be turned around into a political quagmire that can actually bring this country into a serious deterioration. Now, so the question is, what values or norms, as we've been discussing, does an institution like this have, and how do we as people manage to hold them accountable, hold their feet to the fire? And I was a little disappointed at the majority of all of us remaining silent. A mistake is a mistake, but I think given the importance of this mistake, all institutions, the Peace Council, the Christian Council, the Islamic Council, lawyers, people of all walks of life, indeed should have say, please correct this to avoid us deteriorating into a state where we have got to. Now there's tension in the country. There is an awareness that peace may be sacrificed. Now, some have even gone as far as to say if these arithmetic mistakes by the Electoral Commission are challenged, it means that you don't want peace. No, I think that is a very wrong assessment of the situation. What needs to be understood is that peace must not be got at the expense of justice and truth. So we find ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, in a situation whereby in Ghana today there's a debate about peace versus justice. Can there be peace without justice? Let's ask that question. And let's ask the question also, is our political dispensation serving us the way we have allowed it year after year, cycle after cycle, to deteriorate? In a sense, our political system is also challenging every time, as everybody acknowledges but refuses to address it. It involves more and more money. It involves more and more incumbency abuse. It involves giving, as it were, to the highest bidder. So now we are in a situation where people within institutions have privilege. You know, we give them all that they need, we give them the status that they need. But very often, as I observed over the last 25, 30 years, in Ghana, when a privilege is given to a group or sometimes even an individual, that privilege very quickly becomes a right. And the example I love to give often is that I've watched over the years, driving in the crazy traffic of Accra and the larger cities of Ghana, that Okada drivers, for example, were given a privilege, illegal as it may be, to sometimes sneak across the red traffic lights. And it gradually became an established norm. But today, your average Okada driver sees it as his right to be able to go through a red traffic light, sees it as his right to be able to squeeze in between the cars, and even claim that there is an imaginary middle lane between the cars that is meant for Okada drivers. Now, I think this, if we are examining who we are, is a behavior that cuts across the board. And what I'm inviting you to think about in these very important times, shaky times, that have we allowed people with privilege, politicians, institutions like the EC that is held up in very high esteem, or was all over Africa and the world in its previous incarnation, have we allowed an institution like that to take its privilege and start to see it as a right and behave in a dictatorial, unapologetic, and disrespectful manner to 30 million Ghanaians? We run losing our reputation as a beacon of stability and democracy in the sub-region. Now, let me go back a little bit to some of the history of Ghana. 45 years ago, thereabouts, we all took part in something that was against a military dictatorship, as it was considered at the time, something called Unigov. And there was a movement called the People's Movement for Freedom and Justice, which we all took part in. At the time, the current head of state here was a luminary in it. And it was the People's Movement for Freedom and Justice. The justice was what was sought. It was the justice from the dictatorship of a military regime that wanted to perpetuate itself by creating something called Unigov. We won't get into that. But out of that, people were imprisoned, people lost their freedom, people were exiled, and we even set up a group at the time that looked at the prisoner of conscience. And some very important people of past memory now became prisoners of conscience that we fought for justice for internationally. And eventually their freedom was secured. So what I'm saying now is that we've reached a stage where we are slipping into something that we need to avoid. The use of institutions to deprive Ghanaians of their liberty and of their aspirations. We've been there before, and we all came together to fight it. Let me also conclude by saying that we always talk about our international partners, so on and so forth. But our international partners, I must say, have had a little bit of a deafening silence approach to the current situation. They were here, they saw the arithmetic errors, and were slow, if not completely tacit, about these mistakes. And I think that the time has come for all and sundry, for this beacon of stability in West Africa to remain so, for noise, for the right system to have the justice put in place, because we are talking about justice, not just peace. We've heard a lot about we want peace, but it's, you know, I always actually ask, well, I didn't hear anybody say we want war. But the cry for peace must be underpinned with a force for justice.